I'm Bill Dingha Cynabal, but I'm also Machagon.
Hello, everyone. We're here for yet another CSM candidate. We are here with Machagon, and he is going to tell us who he is and how he started playing Eve. And I know that he has had quite an adventure this last year.
Yeah, so I'm Machagon, although you might know me better as Bill Dingha Cynabal, who is the alt I started a year ago for my YouTube channel, and it really is, Bill is these days entirely my main. I log into Machagon relatively rarely, but it's more often now that he's the candidate. I was actually going to run as Bill Dingha Cynabal, but that ended up not because of the way the account was created. I don't even know, some database flag thing. Anyways, I'm Machagon. I've been playing for 15 years now. I started playing Eve in 2009. My wife and I had just moved to a new city, and she was pregnant with our first child, and so we both started playing Eve as something just to do together. And for the last 15 years, I've been in the game pretty much constantly doing all kinds of things. I dove into low sec PvP pretty much like a week in, and that's really been the main thing that keeps pulling me back to the game over and over again. But I've also been CEO of a small wormhole corp. I've been in faction warfare. I joined Noir and did mercenary work with them for a little while. Before always coming back to like either Tama or Amamake and just digging in and enjoying the solo PvP life. And for the last year, with building a Cinnaball, I've been starting a new character on an Iron Man sort of challenge run that I came up with myself, where I thought to myself, if I started with a Corvette, I was talking to some people on Discord about the loadout of the Corvette, about how it comes with that civilian gun and that civilian miner. And I was asking myself, that implies that the Corvette's meant to be able to, no matter what happened, no matter what went wrong, that you could go out into space, mine some rocks, shoot some NPCs, and build your way up from there. So I was like, well, I wonder if that's actually possible. So I started this channel where I was taking that starter Corvette with the 5,000 ISK and the civilian loadout, and I was just like, I'm not going to buy or sell a single thing to or from other players in the market. Everything I need, I'm going to loot myself or build myself from BPOs. And I wonder if I can bootstrap my way all the way up to a Cinnaball, which was not an easy thing to build. And I didn't know how hard it was going to be. I didn't know how hard it was going to be, but here we are a year and almost 70 episodes later, and we're getting close. We're getting close.
How far away are you?
Uh, well, so as of the last episode, I actually have collected every single thing that's needed for the actual Cinnaball construction. So it's the build processes left. Actually, that's not true. Everything that was needed for the Cinnaball construction when I started the run. The Equinox changes threw a pretty big wrench in my plans by adding the Angel Net Resonators to the build list, which are gotten from Angel loyalty points. Although I'm actually really excited about that because it means the home stretch is going to involve engaging directly in faction warfare to get the Malachim Zealots LP. So yeah, we're pretty much at the like get the net resonators, build the Cinnaball, get to Zarzak. Maybe there's 10 episodes left. We're very much in Act 3.
Oh, that is very, very cool. So you're campaigning for the CSM this year. What do you think you can bring to the CSM? What are 3 points that you have?
Right. So I'll start by just answering that directly, boiling down my sort of platform into what I think the 3 biggest points are. The first one is that I'm really invested in what I call the new-ish player experience. I think that CCP has always, like, perennially been focused on the new player experience, and when they talk about it, they're talking about like the tutorial, sometimes the career agents. I think that stuff is important and needs work still, but I really feel like after a player is done, the tutorial, career agent, Sisters of Eve arc pipeline, that there's this huge gap and it just drops off into nothing. And I really have some, I think, pretty decent ideas and a lot of enthusiasm for what could be done to make it so that new players, after they've finished that first pipeline, get some guidance about where to go next.
Okay.
So that's number one, newish player experience. My second big bugbear is I want to remove false difficulty and what I call traps from the game. Um, I hear players talk about when you talk about making any when you if a CSM candidate talks about making anything in this game easier, people very quickly are like, "Oh, don't dumb down Eve Online." And I think that actually Eve Online's complexity and difficulty is a big selling point, but there are still a bunch of places in the game where things are hard or tedious for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk more about this later, but I have a bunch of things on my list where I'd like to say there's no reason for this to be hard, and there's no like complexity gain from it being hard. So let's make it easy. Um, that's number two. The third one I'd say is, and this is a very broad philosophical thing, I want to ensure that as much content as possible, and especially new content that's added, is interactable and can be engaged with by both established groups and experienced veteran players, and also by newer players or solo players. And I don't think that those interactions need to be the same, but I think if any content is added that's like, this is for the vets, this is for the large groups, new players, solo players, wait your turn, the next expansion is going to be for you, I think that's a big mistake. And similarly, I think it's also a mistake to be like, this is for the new players, not for the big groups and the veterans, because that's leaving out a big group of players, but also because the established groups and the veterans are still going to come do what they can with it, break it wide open, right? I think that all the
Mm-hmm.
content needs to be intentionally designed to have these multiple levels of engagement. And I'm again, I'm trying to get through it quickly, but I will talk about that in more detail if you have more questions about it.
Okay. So, since you had this Iron Man run, you of course started as a brand new player.
Mhm.
After going through that experience, what do you think the biggest challenge is facing new players coming into the game?
Right. So I think that the two biggest challenges for new players are, well, they're almost kind of the same, is, like I said, the newish, what happens after the tutorial, the career agents, and the Sisters of Eve
Mm-hmm.
arc. What do you do after that? There's like a big gap there, and the traditional advice is, oh, that's when you join a player corporation, which is good advice. I think that getting new players into player communities, whether it's a corporation or some other sort of looser affiliation, as early as possible is great. But it can be hard to find the right corporation. Making the wrong choice at that stage can just lock people out of the game, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
finish that pipeline and you end up, joining a corp through a random recruitment message in your Eve mail or in local, and the corp you join is shit, then it's just going to ruin your experience straight away. And I think we probably lose a lot of players right at that point. Um, and even if you get into a great corp, like into one of the, Eve universities or any of the other like really well developed starter corps, I mean, like tutorial sort of Eve learning corps, there's only so much guidance that they can actually give you, right? You're still in a position where you have to find your own way to the content. So that's the other second thing that I want to really ensure is that there is some more attention paid to ways in game for players to find the good parts of the game. And then the other challenge that I would identify is this feeling of always being behind, right? Especially with the huge skill point gap. Um, New players, I've heard it so many times. They're like, okay, I'm just never going to catch up. So I have to be playing this game at a perpetual disadvantage to the people who've been playing for 10 years. And the people who've been playing for 10 years will tell you that's absolutely not true, but it is true in some ways, and the ways in which it's not true are non-obvious. So that ties back into the thing I was talking about ensuring that content is designed with multiple levels of engagement, where there's things for new players to do as well as things for established players and large groups to do. But I also do think there's some room for not only like speeding up the progression to things like skill points for new players, but also making it more obvious like what cool things new players can do even with the ISK and skill point limitations they have.
So, would you actually be an advocate for giving all of the new players coming into the game their Magic 14 up to 5?
I've actually been thinking about that. My knee-jerk reaction is yes. I think that new characters should have more skill points. I also do think that it is important that new players learn early on about the advantage of pushing things to 5 and the opportunity cost, the selection game we all have to play of what to train when, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that Magic 14 does fly in the face of that because the universal advice is, well, you just train this now and then you have fun after. Um, I I feel like maybe the optimal solution is at the very minimum giving all the Magic 14 to 4 and probably some of them at 5, but leaving a couple so that players can be like, oh yes, if I like now I understand that if I train this last thing to 5, if I commit to the 5 to 10 days of training, then I get this big boost to all of my ships. I think
Right.
understanding core skills is something that players need to get early, but it shouldn't
Mm.
be locked behind a okay, I understand it, now I have to train for 60 days. I also think that, frankly, new players should probably be given their racial corvette and racial weapon system to 5 right off the bat. I think there's room to let players have the experience of being not optimal, but like very, very well skilled to fly a small subset of ships right out of the gate.
Okay, that's an interesting idea. Uh, do you think that ideas like, you know, giving them access to the same content as vets that CCP puts in the game, or giving them more skill points or access to their faction weapons, is that going to help improve the retention, or do you think something else will improve that retention?
Well, I think that there are lots of things that can be done to improve retention, but I do think that that certainly can't hurt. I think it will. I think it absolutely will help improve retention. I don't think it's the magic band-aid that will fix all of it. Um, when I say when I say that they should have the ability to engage with the same content that the more established groups are engaging in, like one example that's very sort of current right now is the Mednox moon drills,
Right.
right? So Athenors were engageable content. Athenor mining was engageable content, and still is. There are still some Athenors in the game that new players could engage in. Right, you could hop an adventure and join a moon mining op,
Right.
and then or you could hop in, like a rifter and go try and harass miners. Um, the Metanox removes that. And I don't think that Metanoxes are bad. I think that there's a lot to be said in terms of like removing tedium for adding back in some passive moon mining. But if I was on the CSM when something like the Metanox was being talked about, I would have been a very vocal component of there needs to be a heist mechanic or a siphon mechanic or something so that a new player, when they warp into a system and they see a bunch of Metanox moon drills, are like, oh, there's something I can do here, not just like, oh well, I can't bash 25 million hit points of structure, so this is of no relevance to me.
Right. Okay, so then, and I probably know the answer to this at this point. When's the last time you ran the NPE?
Well, actually, you may not know the answer because it wasn't, in fact, with building a Cinnaball. For the Iron Man construction that I made, part of what I did was that part of the challenge rules were I skipped the tutorial. I
Okay.
skipped the career agents because they give you
Mm,
modules, right?
right.
And they give you tips. And I was like, no, 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 no. Bill doesn't get a frigate until he's got the materials and the money for a BPO to build it himself using a Corvette. Um, but it wasn't that long ago. In fact, I would say one of the biggest like qualifications I have that I can point to for why I might be a good CSM member is that 2 years ago, I found myself running the career agents again, and I was just like, "What? Why are these missions exactly the same as they were when I first ran them 15 years ago?"
Mm-hmm.
And I don't just mean that they haven't been updated and it's still like 2009 game design, although that's a problem. I mean things like they were really just giving you maliciously incorrect advice, right? Like if you showed up to the mining mission in a venture then there was a pop-up that said, you can't run the mission in this ship because it doesn't have room to hold 500 cubic meters of ore, right? Because it was looking at the cargo hold and not the, and because the mission had been designed before ships had
Right.
mining bays, right? Or then also like it told you that I think your damage control was like, don't forget to activate your damage control, right? And it's like, really? Like just actively bad advice that's like misrepresenting how the game works, right? And there was a and the one of the worst ones was there was a mission where they were like, you should use your stasis webifier on this guy so he can't warp off grid, right? Um,
Yep.
so it made me so mad, and I was like, okay, I was running it as Machagon just for a faction standing boost because I had a problem with my MR standing, but I was like, no, okay, I need to really torture myself by understanding every way in which this is horrible. So then I created a new character. I ran through all of the career agents, taking meticulous notes of every single problem and posting these profanity-laden rants about it with like very detailed and prioritized bug lists attached to each rant to Reddit. And everyone was like, "Oh my, this is great content, but why the hell are you wasting your time?" Right? Like, this is obviously a lot of work you're putting into this, and no one's going to care, and nothing's ever going to change. So that was 2 years ago. I ran all of them. I made like 7 Reddit posts, identified hundreds of bugs. Um, and then a year later, in Uprising, the career agents, they weren't redesigned, but almost every single bug I had identified was fixed. So 1 year, like year and a bit ago, just before I started my challenge, I went through and I ran the career agents again, just to go back and update my list and say what's been fixed, what hasn't. And in the Reddit post where I posted the results and we're like 99% of these are fixed now, CCP members came into the thread and were like, yeah, they were fixed because we were using your list.
Yep. I, I'm. Pr-
Um,
I was pretty pleased when things started getting updated and changed, and even now, between when I became CSM member and today, there will be like little ninja fixes here and there. So they've done
yeah,
a
yeah,
pretty stellar job on that.
yeah, it's great. I mean, that's like the only reason that I'm even considering running for the CSM is because we have evidence that, given the right feedback, CCP is actually interested in like fixing the little things that are broken, not just
Yep.
making new shiny things.
100%. So, one of the things that CCP kind of is looking at doing or wants to do, but hasn't managed to achieve it, they just haven't put two and two together. They want to get people from the NPE, the career missions, and into faction warfare because engagement with a community or engagement with people tend to keep people around longer.
Hmm.
What advice would you give the CCP about accomplishing this? Because there's like say there's a bridge on both sides with the major break in the middle, and they just haven't figured out how to connect the sides of the bridge.
Right. So, I mean, I think that getting people into communities is always going to be a big ask. I think that people start playing the game and they want to learn it as a game, and there's a very strong drive even today. I mean, it's changed over years in gaming, but even today there is a strong drive to want to be able to engage with a game almost as a single player game until you feel good enough, to engage in the multiplayer parts of it. And where Eve is not a game where people start feeling good enough very early on, I
Right.
think that they are more inclined to want to try and stay in single player mode longer. Um, so I think it's a hard question. I do think that faction warfare it has been a big win. I think that I mean it's been around for a long time, but the recent attention that's been paid to it has been really great. The ability to enlist as an individual, though it's brought some pain to actual faction warfare, the way that in terms of things like AWOXing and community building there, it's let people get into somewhere where there's a community with less of a commitment. And the thing I really love about the faction warfare community is that the community isn't tied to the corp membership, right? Whether you're corpse enlisted, whether you're enlisted individually, whether you're in a corp and enlisted separate from the corp, the community there is in the militia chat, it's in the discords, it's a very broad community umbrella. And I think communities like that one are the kind of things that are going to be the most useful to the new players, right? Um, I'm not sure how CCP can drive direction, can drive guidance towards these things which are necessarily community created. I think what would be a huge boon to new players is if they got into a couple of good discords early on, even if they kept playing independently, right? Or
Yep.
got into a couple of good channels early on, even if they kept playing independently. I've been in a bunch of corps over my AVE career, and I've made really good friends. But in general, I am self-directed enough that I always sort of come back to either, well, usually come back to being in a one-man corp like I am currently, right?
Right.
But when I fly in my one-man corp, flying around lowsec on Machagon, doing solo PvP, I've got like 10 chat boxes open, right? And
Right.
I'm on like 6 discords. And communities like bringing solo back is one that I'm pretty active in game, and I think of that group as being like my group, even though there's no corp affiliation, right? So I would have to think harder about how we can actually drive that because it's a very difficult thing to bridge. But that's mostly my answer. Let's try and get people earlier into these broader communities that aren't just corporations.
I totally agree there. So, with that being said, what would your definition community be in Eve?
Um, well, I mean, I think I've kind of just said it, right?
Yeah.
I think that we talk about community and corpse being the same thing far too often. I think that for most people, when they've been playing EVE Online, especially for a while, what they have is they end up with these, just like in our real life, you've got these like 3 or 4 different intersecting friend groups, right? And that whole Venn diagram is your community, right?
Yep.
And we need to, and I think that that's fantastic. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think it's a problem that I've got, a Discord that I'm in from my old corp, and I still talk to those guys. I still go in rooms with them, and then I've also got the bringing solo back chat channel open, and then I've also got the whole Discord community that's built up around my Corvette to Cynabal challenge run, right? Which is like fans, but also lots of people who are sort of doing the same
Yep.
challenge, having been inspired by the channel, right? And like those are 3 or 4 separate communities, but they create a very rich social whole, like a fabric for me when I'm playing, and that's how I think
Yep.
of the community. Even though I'm in a one-man corp, that's almost totally irrelevant.
Yeah, I have spent a lot of time this past year with CCP whenever they put out a survey or they're talking about community. Of course, they're directing it at in-game community corps and alliances. I have to keep
Mhm.
reminding them that there are some very, very large communities that have no in-game presence.
Right,
Stop identifying community as just being a corporation, because that's not true. So
right. I couldn't agree more.
so then with you flying around, being in a lot of different places, gathering up things, especially this past year, and being in faction warfare, uh, do you see a lot of toxicity? And just to be clear, I'm not talking about PvP. I'm not talking about ganking. I'm not talking about melting the face off of that 1 day old new player, or some light salt and banter. I'm talking about all the stuff from today's world that we shouldn't even be talking about or thinking about and bringing it into the game.
Yeah, yeah. I do think that I mean, so first off, I understand your distinction completely. I love trash talk. I think that there's no real problem with like salt farming. I think that's fine.
Exactly.
I think people should be friendly. When I kill, especially if I kill a newer player, but even when I kill an older player, like if they want to convo me afterwards, then I will be meticulously polite and friendly in chat all the time, even if they've killed me, right? It happens that I've been like in a solo fight and then been, dropped by a fleet and they just like, and it feels bad, right? But then I'll chat to them and I'm there's no resentment in me at
Exactly.
all. I'm just like it's gone. It's funny. Um, but there is real toxicity, yes. And it really is a big problem. I I don't I try not to be like a wilting flower about it. I don't let it ruin my day. I don't I don't let it affect me a lot personally, which is sort of easy to do. I mean, I'm a straight white dude. That's a good start. But also, I do think that it's like really important and we need to address it. I'm not sure what the easy ways of addressing it are. I think that a lot of it is tied to just like broader human culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not even Eve culture, not even gaming culture, although those things are relevant. Um, the kind of stuff I see that really bothers me is like, for example, when I was on the CCP interview uh, in the Twitch chat stream, right? Like, poor CCP Lumi, just like doing her job, right?
Yep.
Um, and it's things that people don't even like think of as harassment, right? But people are commenting like, "Oh, you'd be so much prettier without your glasses on." And it's like, what the fuck, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then in game, you see things like I honestly feel like misogyny is probably the one you see most often, because I do think the player base is getting more mature and more thoughtful as time goes on. That first off, society is improving on this front, but also I think that the kind of person that Eve Online attracts has changed over the years. But like casual sexism is just so ingrained in our like broader culture that people aren't even aware they're doing it, right?
Right.
And like I say about not being a wilting flower is that you know when people are say like if someone says like let's go whore on that kill mail, honestly even just that it's such common usage, right? But it's like I'm like I don't love it. I'm not going to bring it up in chat channel. I don't think less of the person who uses the word kill mail whore, or who's like don't be a pussy. Like I don't think that person's a bad person. I don't think that's a hill worth dying on.
Right.
But the fact that that sort of thing is so ingrained in our language allows darker stuff
Yeah.
to sort of sneak in more easily. Um, when I see like egregious sexism, when I see homophobia, when I see racism in game or in the game communities, I am the kind of person who will usually call it out and try and call it out in a like productive and proactive way. Just be like, hey, dude, this isn't actually making people feel welcome and we're trying to like make a space like I know you didn't mean anything by it but we're trying to make a space here where everyone feels welcome, so like take it easy. And then if it gets more severe, I will report people, although I don't think that's like I don't think that's a productive first step. I don't think that someone just like playing their game and then getting a report
Yeah.
is likely to change their behavior. I think that you need to like have the conversation first.
Yeah. Sometimes a
Um,
little education goes a long ways.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's important that CCP have the community's back on this and be like fast and consistent in the
Yep.
way they deal with these kinds of reports when they get them. But in the end, it has to fall on the shoulders of the people who are running the communities, right?
Yep.
As sad as that is, there's like no other people running the communities and people in the communities have to be doing a certain amount of self-policing. That's how society works.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one. So now we're going to turn to what's become my favorite part of these interviews. I have a crystal ball. You just got elected into CSM19.
Yay.
Now, you're in your very first meeting, and in the first meeting, generally, CCP will reveal what is coming up on the next expansion, maybe the next two or three. Maybe they'll even give you a little bit of view into like the next 2 years. You may not be CSM for it, but you kind of get a glimpse. However, you find out that absolutely nothing that you campaign for or what you really do in game is making it into the expansion. What do you think you're going to do?
Well, so I have a couple of answers. The first off is that I have not come into this as I'm the like X candidate. You're electing me because this is the area of space I care about. These are the changes I'm going to push for. I mean, we're not the CSM are not developers, right?
Exactly.
Having the laundry list of changes that you want to see done is not going to be super useful to begin with. You can try and move the conversation. But I'm really running as basically an enthusiasm candidate, right? I think that people who watch my channel or have got to know me in game know that I'm thoughtful about the game design, that I care about it, that I care about the players, and that I really do keep finding new ways to have fun in this game, and I think I have a good eye for what will incentivize fun gameplay and what won't, regardless of whether it's something I've done before. So I feel very comfortable walking into a meeting like that where it's like we're going to talk about something that's not, low sex solo PvP, which is like if there's anything in this game that I'm an expert on, it's low sex solo PvP. I will happily talk about any other area of the game. I've been involved in almost all of them at some point, with the notable exception of Sovereign Null play, because I've never been a part of any of the large blocks. But I mean, I know people who are, and I can talk to people, and I'm good at listening, and I'm good at learning. And the one thing I'll really bring into that conversation is a thing I talked about in my like top 3 platform points, which is that regardless of what's on the menu, there should be a way for them to ensure that it's engageable by everybody, right? If they're pushing out a big Sovereign Null update, if they're pushing out a big Potchman update, my question's going to be, how is the guy who's been flying around Lowsec and a Rifter looking for fights, like, this is not for him directly, but if he wants to make it for him, how can we make there be fewer barriers to him jumping in and seeing what it's about?
Okay, so
Right?
now we're gonna take this one step further. Um, Sometimes, if you've been playing the game long enough, things that you really enjoy are gonna get axed or changed or nerfed, or just taken out of the game completely. Uh, what are you going to do if CCP tells you that, hey, we're going to get rid of Cynabals?
Right. I mean, so it's funny to use that example because they obviously won't get rid of Cinnaballs. And I think that's important to look at because this is probably going to make me some enemies. I don't think CCP like really ever kills playstyles. I think that people love to say they've killed playstyles, but that there's like two very different conversations and two very different ideas that are passing there. Um, my core gameplay for the last year has been building a Cinnaball, and halfway through, they completely changed the build cost of a Cinnaball. Um, and I was like, I panicked for about 1 hour, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna find a way to keep going because I'm having fun doing this. This gameplay is fun in and of itself, right? And I think that's the most important thing is that people say, oh, CCP has killed C5 ratting. Oh, CCP has killed data set exploration. Oh, right. They almost people CCP has killed Rorqual mining. When people say that, they almost always mean um, CCP has made it so I earn 10% fewer space bucks doing this activity that I presumably enjoy. Therefore, I can't enjoy it anymore. And I think that is a player problem mindset. And I would love if we could encourage people to be like thinking about whether what they're doing is fun.
Yep.
And excuse me, and maybe trying to find a way to make their gameplay more immediately rewarding and less tied to whether this is the best possible ISK per hour or whether this is the best possible solo meta ship, right? I fly the Vigil Fleet issue. That's my main ship in low sec solo. I love it so much. It was underrepresented, and I loved that because it was like a sleeper ship, and I sort of found a way. I think I can take credit for being like the guy who found a way to break the Vigil Fleet issue wide open as a solo ship. And now the fit that I designed is like the fit you see. Um, I think the Vigil Fleet issue is actually probably overpowered, if I'm totally honest. I think that the ways in which it's overpowered are non-obvious, but it's really hard to engage. If CCP comes in and changes my ship, like, I'll be fine. I'll find a new fit. I'll find a new ship, right? It doesn't like, and I'll also keep flying the Vigil Fleet issue. I don't need to win, you know, 90% of my engagements, right? If I'm suddenly winning 60% or 40% of my engagements, I can still have fun doing that. And
Yep.
I'm not sure how we can communicate that to the player base, but I think that's really my stance on it is uh, a little bit of change is not that bad, and stop chasing the optimum so much.
Yeah, I always tell all of my players who start moaning at me whenever CCP, kills their style of playing, adapt, overcome, go find something else, or, just deal with it. Because,
Mhm.
yeah, I agree. They don't really kill play styles that much. Now, you are kind of more or less a free agent
Mhm.
in the CSM. How do you feel about different communities that may have a CSM or they may not have a CSM that represents them coming to you and asking for help?
Well, I mean, as I've pitched myself as the, unaffiliated, agenda-free enthusiasm candidate, I obviously, like, I am so open to that. And one of the advantages of being unaffiliated is that if a Potchman group or a C6 wormhole group is like, look, we have this issue that we care about, we need a CSM candidate or CSM member to, you know, take our issue to CCP, I'm easily in a position where I'm able to and would enjoy being like, well, invite me, let me come fly with you for a bit, right? I'm not in a corp, I'm not in a block, I have no political affiliations. I can easily take my main into somebody's C6 wormhole, fly with them for a bit, and see firsthand what it is they're dealing with. And then also, I would seek out and whether through Reddit or whether through Discord, I would find the people who the change they're pitching, the change they're against or the change they're for, whatever it is. I'll find the people who believe the exact opposite as well, right? And make sure I understand their viewpoint. Because every time someone's like, "Oh my God, they slightly nerfed Workles, and that completely breaks my playstyle. It's dead." There's also somebody else who's like, I have this thing I want to do, and if Workles are nerfed, it'll make it more easy for me to do it, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean that's the real answer is that if a community comes to me, I will 100% engage with them. I'll fly with them. I'll educate myself on the issue, and then I'll come to CCP with enthusiasm and try and actually work towards whatever needs to be done.
Okay, then players sometimes have a very unrealistic view of the CSM. They expect us to be able to just waltz into the boardroom and beat our chest and start demanding changes.
Mhm.
Have you given any thought to how you're going to balance the limitations placed on you as a CSM, both that you're pretty much just an advisor, and of course you have the NDA hanging over your head, with making sure that players feel heard?
Right. I mean, so it will definitely take some thinking and some understanding and some talking to CCP if elected to make sure I understand the shape of the NDA. I'm personally not 100% clear on what the limitations are of what a CSM can say because there have been other CSM members I've seen in the past who have been extraordinarily good at communicating with the player base. And there have been other CSM members who are like, I wish I could tell you, but NDA, right?
Right.
And I'm sure that sometimes people are breaking the NDA, and I'm sure that sometimes people are hiding behind the NDA when they really could be doing good communication.
Right.
And I feel pretty confident in my ability to sort of walk that line and figure out how to maximize player communication while also respecting what needs to be secret,
Right.
or at least not be like what would be harmful to leak. The uh, sorry, the in terms of not being able to drive development, one thing that helps is that my like platform list, the list of things I've said that I want to see changed, mostly aren't like expansion level changes.
Right.
I'm realistic. I'm not coming into this proposing a like 200 point 200 point list of how to revitalize NPC nullsec, right? That where it's like, here, I've designed an entire expansion for you. That's not useful, right? I have a long list of things I'd like to see changed. I'd like to see the insurgency map fixed. I'd like to see Corvettes rebalanced, which maybe only I care about, but I care about a lot. I'd like to see some small changes to the way that faction warfare LP is incentivized. Maybe we can deal with AWOXing. I want to see some fixes to the UI in various places, like planetary interaction, especially, right? All of these things, though, are on the like smaller side, and I do know I do know that a CSM member who can lay out a very clear case for why this needs to be done and what exactly needs to be done, if it can be done with a relatively small amount of developer hours, that's the kind of change that you can lead the charge on and get done. Um, in terms of in terms of dealing with what CCP brings to us, even if it's not what we would have wanted. Again, I might make some enemies here, but honestly, I broadly trust CCP's vision of the game. Um, I and I know that's controversial to say. Uh, they aren't bringing out the expansions, or they're not addressing the issues in the order that I would prioritize them. But I think there have been some really incredible changes lately with faction warfare, with in the new player experience. The air career system was like so good, almost no downside,
Yep.
and much needed, right? Uh, so I do think that CCP usually comes to the table with good ideas, and they often, it seems like, come to the table with some very bad misconceptions about how their proposed changes will actually play out once the players get a hold of them. And I think that that is somewhere the CSM is maximally able to be useful.
I couldn't agree more with that. Now, I do have a few questions from my community.
Oh, great.
One of them has to do with multiboxing. Where this is coming from is half of my community are multi-boxers. The other half honestly believe that every player should be restricted to one account and maybe even just one character, axe the other two on the account. What's your stance on it?
So I have been a one account player for almost the entire 15 years that I've been in Eve. There were 2 months. There were 2 months where I was like, you know what? I'm really into this low sec solo PvP, and low sec solo PvP with two ships would obviously be way better. I would win more often, and I'd be able to take fights I can't take. So I was like, I'm going to create a second account. I'm going to dual box solo PvP, and I just found it miserable. It wasn't fun. So that account, like, I did it for 2 months, and then I was like, nope, screw that. And then now I've got two Omega accounts because I've got Bill Dingha Cynabal. The YouTube channel character is Omega, and Machagon's Omega. I don't think I've ever been undocked in space on both of them at the same time, in the whole time that I have been running the channel. So on that front, I am very much a single account player. I will advocate for the joys and the benefits of single account play, but I also think that multiboxing is part of the game, and I don't even think it's a bad thing that it's part of the game. If somebody is wired differently from me and really enjoys it, then I don't think we should take that away from them. What I do think is that it's important that design decisions be made in a way that always protects the experience of the single account player. Um, I think that a multi-boxer running missions, a multi-boxer mining, even a multi-boxer running a small PvP fleet, like all of these things are fine. But if the design is such that somebody doing that is not only optimal, but also locks a single player out of engaging with the content or engaging with that multi-box fleet, then you've got a problem. I would say right now, the most obvious case of this is in faction warfare in the 5-man complexes, where these complexes have just been like trivially optimized to be run by a 5 account Algos fleet, right? And that just is the best way to get the LP. There's no way for other ships that can slide into that complex that are run by a player with a single account to engage with that 5-man fleet. And there's no way to outcompete it unless you have 5 actual people who are like, okay, we're going to go hunting these 5-man Algos fleets. And there's not much satisfaction in killing a 5-man multi-boxing Algos fleet. So there's no incentive to do that, right? Um, I don't think that the people running the 5 Algoses are a problem. I don't think they should be punished. I don't think that we should be mad at them. They're doing what the game is incentivizing them to do.
Right.
I think that we should make changes, like possibly these small complexes should be two-person reward, right? Because a multi-box two algos fleet is something that a solo player or a pair of players can deal with. And at the medium complexes, there are a lot more options for dealing with the multi-boxers, so five algoses or five vexers wouldn't be as dominant,
Right.
right? So that's my stance, is that multiboxing is healthy, it's fine, but we shouldn't tolerate content that makes multiboxing necessary.
Okay. And then what is your stance on skill injectors?
Mm, that's a hard one. I've been playing for a long time. I was definitely a hardliner of, if CCP starts selling skill points, it'll be the death of the game. That was my stance. And then when skill injectors came around, and with skill extractors being a plex sync, like functionally, CCP did start selling skill points. I know there's still a new red line in the sand, but the original red line in the sand was definitely crossed. And I honestly think I was wrong. Um, I don't. It didn't kill the game, and I do think that skill injectors, as the game stands right now, the role they fill for allowing new players to do that second level of bootstrapping. Because what happens is, you have a new player, they join. I think that we should really, as community members and veterans, not be encouraging people to skill inject right away, for sure. But you can train up normally, and then you can build yourself a little like ISK loop, and then you can get rich in game. And then skill injectors mean that if you've been playing the game and building up ISK in game, or if you've opened your wallet. But I mostly look at it from the, it provides an opportunity for a player who is engaging with the game like heavily and successfully to then actually say, now I've got the ISK, I'm going to catch up with these people in this other, in this other avenue. Um, so I'm still cautious about them. I'm still worried that at some point we're just going to see skill points in the Nest store. I think that would be a mistake. But I do think that skill injectors are serving a necessary purpose.
Okay. And we are starting to come down to the end of the hour. It flew by. So, anyone out there in Twitch chat that would like to ask some questions, please start typing now. And I'm going to ask you the second to last question of the night. What do you think is the absolute most pressing issue in EVE today? It could be what we've already talked about, it could be stuff that we haven't talked about.
So, yeah, I think the absolute most pressing issue in the Eve today is that it's hard for people to find fun. Um, I think that takes several different guises. Whether it's that there is fun activities that they know about that they want to do but they can't just log in and do them. I think that's a problem. I think that what we talked about before with the newish player experience is like another avatar of that problem, where someone's finished the of Eve arc and then is like, okay, now what? Do I just do missions in high sec forever, right? And they don't know where the fun stuff is. They don't know how to find it. But I also, as I've been doing the Corvette to Cynabal series, the one thing that's happened in my community over and over again is that people who played the game for years and either left or have still been in the game but not really having fun in it, have come and been like, "Oh, I found your series. I started doing this myself, and now I'm like, I've rediscovered the sense of like wonder and excitement that I originally had." Right? That all it took for me to love this game again was to like take away everything that I thought I needed, and just start flying around in a Corvette, killing NPCs in a zero point 0.8 belt, with civilian guns, and suddenly I'm having a blast again, right? Um, I think that having communities like my community and like your community that can drive people towards fun content is important. But I also think there can be in-game hooks. And I would have loved to talk about it, but I know we're running out of time. But I would love to see not necessarily just more missions, but new uses of lore and characters in game to be providing people with like soft nudges towards content they wouldn't otherwise engage with, right? Like, why don't you try solo bubble camping? Why don't you try going into a C6 wormhole and see what that's like? Why don't you go to Pochman, right? I think that if we had, you know, Aura is a kind of boring character, but the way that Aura is used could be done with other interesting characters,
Yeah,
right? If
I agree.
Gary Malakin was popping up and being like, I've got something for you, and it's not a mission, right? But it's like, oh, maybe if I do this, something neat will happen, right?
So I have a. It's not really a question. It's more of a comment. Um, All Haven Games says, I think making or events are a good way to bring in a new player. I think making them where others can't come in and steal the combat site would help. Now, out in HiSec, I run a lot of incursions, and we steal each other's sites all the time. If there's another group or multiboxer that's just going too slow, we go in and we do something called contesting. So that is essentially what's happening when someone else comes along and takes an event site. It's PvP, it's just a different type of PvP. Do you think CCP should make it so that event sites can't be stolen?
Well, so I mean, I'm sorry to your. No, I absolutely don't. I absolutely don't think that. I think there's a different problem going on here. I love the event sites. I only run them in low sec because I don't usually fly in high sec. And in low sec, the thing that's most interesting about the the thing that's most interesting about the event sites is the way that they are incubators for spontaneous PvP.
Right.
Right. And that's what's great about them is that they're rewarding enough that you want to run them. And I run them when these events come up in my PvE ships that are PvP fit. Right. I run them because the rewards are good, but I run them kind of hoping someone's going to try and jump me. Right. Because that's when things actually get spicy and fun. And I also hunt people in them. And I think that in fact, I would love if CCP learned from the design of the event sites and made some more content that is evergreen that uses that same basic it pops up on the overview mechanic to encourage emergent PvP. I think I think the frustration that people have is not tied to these sites being places that people can come and interact with you. I don't think that's the problem. I think it's more to do with the design of HiSec. And I think that there are some large questions that CCP eventually needs to grapple with about what HiSec's purpose is. And I'm not advocating for the removal of HiSec or the radical changing of HiSec. I think they need a different design philosophy for content in HiSec than the design philosophy they use for content in LowSec.
Right.
Because these HiSec event sites are essentially the sites have been designed with low-sec interaction in mind and then plopped into high-sec. And when you put these low-sec style sites in high-sec, you get people optimizing their interaction to dive in at the last second, steal the kill, steal the loot. And that is zero fun for the person who's running them, right? So I think that there needs to be, I think they need to be reevaluated. I think they need to be redesigned. I think there needs to be a way for someone who runs the site to get rewarded, even if someone else contests it. But I don't think the solution is going to be locking them down, instancing them, and making it so interaction's impossible, because interaction is good.
So this brings a question that I have for you. What would you think about redo, or if CCP came to you as a CSM and said, we want to redo mechanics of HiSec, we want to look at, letting people PvP, make it something meaningful. So if your ship is getting ganked, you can actually fight back. What would you think about this? What do you think you could bring to the table?
I have a lot of ideas about this. If you'd asked this question at like minute one of the interview, we'd probably still be talking about it. I do think that I think one of the big traps that happens is that players get locked into high sec because they're scared to go out of high sec. And then the result is that when PvP happens in high sec, they get very, very upset and have no context for how to think about not only like mitigating it or preventing it or responding to it because the only experience they have with with PvP is the high sec experience of like instant overwhelming death, right? That's the shape PvP takes in high sec, and it's not the shape PvP takes in most of the rest of the game, right? And if that's the only PvP you experience, there's no way to ever learn about PvP.
Right.
So yeah, I have a lot of ideas about the ways HiSec could be redesigned. I'm not going to bring them to CCP and pitch them because I don't think that an idea from the CSM is going to be how CCP approaches a redesign of HiSec. But let me tell you, if CCP came to me and was like, our new expansion is going to be about encouraging PvP and HiSec, I would roll up my sleeves.
Awesome. Okay, so I have one last question for you. What other candidates in this race, I think we're down to 48 of us now, would you like to see elected?
So I think it's important that the CSM like cover all of the bases in terms of expertise. Not necessarily in terms of what you're campaigning for, but in terms of parts of the game that you know. Um, the parts of the game that I know the least about are Sovereign Nullsec, Pochven, and then I know HiSec pretty well, but I'm not really familiar with the life of a HiSec resident and PvEer. The kind of person who runs home fronts, who runs level 4 missions in HiSec, who mines in HiSec. I know all of that content, but I don't really understand what that person needs and wants out of the game. So I want to make sure that there are candidates that cover those bases that are my weak spots. We are for sure going to get a Sov Null candidate. We're going to get several Sov Null candidates. I don't have preferences among them. I'm sure whoever they are, I can work with them. On the Pochman front, Drake Idden is a super knowledgeable player. I actually don't know him personally in game, but everything I've ever heard him say has been like thoughtful and well considered, and I think that he would be a great asset. I honestly, I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass, but I would love to be working with you on the CSM. I think
Thank
that
you.
you have the expertise about high sec mechanics, particularly, and about the needs of new players that are. I think about new player experience a lot, but I don't have the community experience with large numbers of new players that I know that you have. So that would be fantastic. Um, I love Switch 4 in a way. I feel like Switch 4 and I have very similar overlapping expertise. But I think there's room for two low sec PvP candidates on the CSM. And I've flown with and against Switch 4 before, and I would love to be working with him. And then the last one is that I think every single person in the game should put Ariel Rin near the top of their ballot because Ariel Rin is the third party tool developer candidate for the CSM, and things like evref and zkill and dotlan are essential parts of the game, and they can't be afterthoughts. And the only way to make sure that CCP knows what's needed is to have someone on the CSM who understands the actual technical side of it thoroughly, and that's Ariel Rin.
Okay, so we are at the end of the interview. Can you tell people where they can find you if they want to continue this conversation?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to know more about me, if you want to see my mug, the place to do it is on my YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is called Tabarnouche Interplanetary, which, if you're not, from Quebec and can't just spell Tabarnouche on the first try, just Google Corvette de Cynabal and you'll find the channel. The channel also, if you go to any of the videos, you'll find a link to my Discord, the Corvette Cynabal Discord, and then the Corvette Cynabal in-game channel. Any of those, whether it's in the YouTube comments, the Discord, or the in-game channel, you'll find me all of the time, either as Machagon or as Bill Dingha Cynabal, and I would love to engage with absolutely anybody.
Okay, perfect. We'll make sure to get all that information into the description of this video when it goes up on YouTube in a day or two. And perfect. I want to thank you so much for coming and talking to us and telling us your views.
Thank you so much for having me. The time flew by. You're a wonderful host.
Thank you so much.